Your relationship with money matters. I'm Michelle Perkins, and this is the Money and You podcast, where I will be breaking down your relationship with money, offering tough love money tips, and a money dating plan that will focus on lifting the barriers to success to help pave the way for better money practices and increased wealth. It's time to take control to live a limit-free life. It starts today. Hello. I'm Michelle Perkins, your host of the Money and You show, broadcasting from ubngo.com in Burbank, California. So happy that you are here with us today. I have a terrific guest, and as you heard in the little intro there, we're talking about money and money mindset and money practices, and along with that, to support anything that you want to do with money, obviously there is your business and your career, and the habits and the way you go about doing those things are going to directly impact your money, and those practices will just translate into practices that you can use around money as well. We're going to talk a lot today about productivity in particular, an interesting type of productivity, mindful productivity. And I have a wonderful guest who is with us from far away Berlin, Germany today. And I'm so excited that he decided to join us. He has a very interesting lifestyle that he'll share with us and is able to split his time across a couple different continents. And I think with that, I'm going to jump right in, because we're going to talk this whole time about how to be more productive, but not in that kind of oppressive, awful sounding, use all your willpower and discipline kind of way, but in being productive so that you're reaching your goals and creating the lifestyle that you want, a limit-free lifestyle, and in a way that really suits you and is anything but oppressive. So I'll jump right in and introduce you to Trevor Lohrbeer. And Trevor, if I am mispronouncing your name, you need to stop me right now. Was that okay?
Don't worry. People mispronounce it all the time.
I will have you pronounce it in just a minute. And Trevor is a serial entrepreneur with 3 startups under his belt, 2 of which he's sold. His 4th and current startup, Day Optimizer, is a web app that helps solopreneurs create daily plans that reflect their priorities, using guided workflows designed around neuroscience principles. He also hosts the Mindful Productivity YouTube channel, where he teaches people concepts, frameworks, and techniques to be productive while living a good life. In his spare time, he's an avid swing dancer and is studying toward his B1 fluency level in German. He lives part-time in Asheville, North Carolina, and part-time in Berlin, Germany. Welcome, Trevor.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. I know it's very late there, and I'm very honored that you are spending time with us, and I know this is going to be a great show for people. I know as an entrepreneur that productivity, as much as we want to pretend it's not one of our biggest problems, it is. Distraction, procrastination, not working on the right things, putting off the stuff that's hard or scary, it's all in front of you like no other earlier time. I mean, I had 15 years in a corporate career, and while it was something to pay attention to, I never had to face my productivity issues like I did when I became an entrepreneur. So,
yes.
So number one, please tell us your name.
So my name is Trevor Lohrbeer. It's against the law to shoot a bear.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry I did not pronounce it correctly.
Not a problem.
That was close. So so give us a little background, because just your lifestyle is clearly intriguing, and it sounds like a very limit-free lifestyle. I'd love to hear some of your background and how you got to this place where you're living the way you're living.
Yeah. So my background is that I'm a serial entrepreneur. So this is my 4th business. I've always kind of gone to the beat my own drummer. So I kind of do my own thing. And my parents were entrepreneurs growing up. So I kind of had that entrepreneur upbringing in a way. Mm-hmm. And I wound up dropping out of college and hitchhiking across the country for 3 years.
Wow.
And landing in San Francisco in the mid-90s. And I grew up with computers in the 80s and learned how to program. My first job right outside of high school was programming for the U.S. Navy.
Wow.
Worked on the GPS satellites, the testing software for some of the GPS satellites we use for navigation today. And so in the mid-90s, I jumped in, found a startup to work for and started doing web development. And that then led me a few years later to found my own internet startup, a company called Slambook, which was basically like, you can think of it like a Facebook add-in or something like that today. But I grew that from 0 to 100,000 users in 9 months using some viral techniques. Was able to sell that because I was starting the next company, which was TruePeers. It was the first social network for professionals. So it was LinkedIn before LinkedIn started. We raised $500,000 of angel funding, and then March 2000 happened, which was the time when the internet bubble popped. And so we could not raise any more money. We did all the mistakes of the dot-com era. You know, we had like way too many people. We rented an entire floor of an office building. You know, we were angel funded, thinking we were going to get VC funded and take over the world. And, you know, everyone at the time thought that. So, but after that, I wound up starting a data visualization company using this technique called a tree map, which helps you visualize portfolios. So it started actually with Smart Money magazine back in the 1999. They created this visualization to visualize the stock market called the map of the market. Well, it turns out that that visualization is really good for all sorts of different portfolios, not just stock portfolios, but portfolios of projects, portfolios of computers on a network, things like that. So I helped develop software that we sold to large corporations. Our customers were things like Walmart, Dell, the US Army, who would then integrate our software into their software to create these visualizations. Because this type of visualization, a tree map, can show up to 100,000 elements on a single screen. So it's very unique in its ability to show large amounts of data and really give that portfolio view. I ran that for 13 years through lots of ups and downs. When I sold it, it was, you could kind of say a zombie company, but I was able to actually sell it and to a company in Boston that made software for Amazon resellers. So we integrated into there so they could visualize the portfolio of products that they were selling on Amazon. Then when I left that company, Techometrics, I said what I really wanted to do next was to really help individuals, not help companies. A lot of my, for the 13 years there for LabEscape, I was working primarily with these large companies, and I wanted to get back to working with individuals. So I started Strategic Life Tools, which was a website to help you figure out what you want to do with your life. You know, see where you're at, where you want to go, and then what are the steps you need to go from here to there. I started that as a membership site until I realized that one of my criteria when I started that business was I really wanted what is called a software as a service business, a subscription business. Okay. Because that's the company that bought mine. And I really got to see that business model from the inside. And it was clear that that's the business model I wanted. I thought I could do that with Strategic Life Tools until I realized that people don't really do life planning on a monthly basis, right? They do it during cusp events. You know, I just graduated, I just got divorced, I just retired. So it wasn't going to be a monthly business. It was going to be back like my old business where you started sales at 0 every single month. Yeah. And then you made the sales for the month and tried to hit your numbers. And that wasn't the business I wanted to run. So I pivoted and I actually ran a whole coaching program for that. And at the end, people are saying, what I'm really struggling with is time management. How do I get the time to do this? And I had developed this technique, I think around 8-10 years prior, on how to do this 3-step process for planning your day, to create a daily schedule for doing time blocking. And decided to actually build an app. There wasn't really any apps out there doing this process. In fact, even today, there's very few time management apps. There's a lot of task management apps, but not many time management apps. So that's what I do today is I help people like manage their time better. And that has gotten now extended into teaching them how to use how to think about their time and thinking about their productivity in general, completely outside of time management. And, how do we do energy management, attention management, all the things that we need to do to be productive and make smart decisions about our time.
Wow. Okay, I love asking people about their background because I'm always just so fascinated by what I end up hearing. And I was riveted. So thank you for the story. I love everything about it. How did these ideas come to you? Do you have a process, or did they just come into your head as you're going through life?
So they come from talking to people, and I have in the coaching world, it's very popular to ask, "What is your superpower?" Right?
Yes, it is.
And my superpower is creating mental models that help people look at the world in new ways to solve existing problems. And Seth Godin says he's really good about naming things. And I would say I'm really good about drawing boxes around things and then naming them, really defining these concepts that then people can use to solve problems.
Can you do me a favor and just kind of explain that term mental models, because it's used a lot these days, and sometimes I think people hear it but they don't actually take it in because they can't visualize what it is.
Yeah, so a mental model is a concept, or it can be a word that helps you hook into something. So let me give you an example from decision making. So one of my other side projects is a pattern language for decision making. There's many types of decisions we make that are follow this pattern, and I call it the conveyor belt pattern. And what it is you have a couple options in front of you, a couple options that are further down on a conveyor belt, and options are even further down on a conveyor belt. And if you think about a factory, on the other room that it hasn't even come into the room, there's options that are being manufactured. And so you have this belt, and if you wait too long, the options fall off the belt. So you can have this visualization that we're in a factory and options are coming down this conveyor belt. You know the most information about the ones that are just in front of you, less information as it gets farther down the line. Well, this pattern exists when you're buying a house, when you're buying a used car, when you're hiring someone, when you're dating. All of these are conveyor belt decisions where your options are constantly changing. You have different amounts of information about those options. And if you wait too long, the options get taken off the market. So how do you make a decision in those situations? So now that I've explained that whole process, we can say, like, now that there's a concept called a conveyor belt decision, you can now go to a friend and probably explain that concept, that mental model, a conveyor belt. You can visualize what it looks like. You can think about how that looks, in your decision-making process. And we can now talk about, what about spacing on options? Like, you're buying a house, in the winter, there's fewer options. So we have spacing, we have seasonality of options. We can talk about options clustering together, and we can have all this visualization around that then lets us use that to make a better decision. So that's just one example of a mental model.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great example. Really interesting. And, decision making is something that I talk to people about all the time. It's that, sticking point where it's just, you've got to make a decision, or you can not make a decision, but there are so many consequences. And I see it with job changers, and I see it with business people, and in my own life. And so, yeah, it's really great to have these kinds of models that you can refer to and get some help from. Okay, so back to productivity. Do you want to talk for a minute about Day Optimizer?
Yeah, sure. So Day Optimizer is based around a 4-step workflow for planning your day. It's called the CASE workflow. It's commit, allocate, schedule, and evaluate. And the idea behind it is that to make smart investments on how we use our time, we need to deliberately plan how we use that time, right? And the way to do that most effectively is to do things in separate steps. To commit, to first decide what we're going to do, so make those decisions, then allocate, figure out how much time we're going to spend on each of those. Or more specifically, how are we going to take our limited time in the day and divide it amongst our different priorities? And then schedule that into different time slots to help us like know when we're on track, to help us manage our energy so we can schedule things into the parts of our day that need more energy, into the parts of the day when we have that more energy, and maybe admin work in the parts of the day when we're low energy. We can work around our appointments. So, and then finally to evaluate, to kind of say, once I built that schedule, usually there's things that we couldn't put on that schedule. Are those more important than the things on the schedule? Can we then take things off? Can we remove the lower priorities and make sure that our schedule is optimized, or our daily plan is optimized for our highest priorities and the things that are going to give us the biggest bang for the buck?
Right, right. Yeah, so interesting. So is that a daily practice that you would recommend?
Yeah, it's a daily practice. And in fact, the software originally had all those steps, and now I have 3 different plans. You can create either a daily commitment list, something called a time bucket that gives you time awareness, but doesn't force you to actually schedule anything, and then the full daily schedule. Ooh. And so it allows people to kind of do time blocking. It allows people to make deliberate choices around their day. And then there's other features like done today versus done forever that help people manage their task flow, because most people are not going to finish all their tasks every single day. Some tasks flow to the next day. So how do we handle that in a way that leverages our brains and gives us more motivation as we do it?
Ooh, I love this. And, so much of what I talk about is mindset. And so much of what you're talking about requires a sort of mindset, because it's very easy to, keep pushing things and do all kinds of things with time and the choices you make with your time that don't feel good, that make you kind of feel less confident and less empowered and all kinds of things. So how do you go into this in terms of mindset?
So I think one of the key mindsets, so I'm doing a coaching program this week, and I've been doing these group coaching calls. And one of the things that keeps getting repeated is this, where people are seeing this mindset shift, is the shift from focusing on getting everything done each day to making progress on things each day.
Nice.
And I think if you're in the mindset that you have to finish everything on your to-do list each day, then you get really stressed when it doesn't happen. And you often will then tend to over allocate toward one thing because I really just want to get this done, when there might be another higher priority you should be working on it and allocating time toward. So shifting into that mindset of how do I make sure I'm making progress on everything, moving all the balls forward, because if you keep moving all the balls forward, you keep making progress, you will reach your goals. But if you get overwhelmed because you're trying to complete everything and you don't actually complete it, then you're going to just stumble. You're going to have more procrastination. You're going to have more distraction, which is going to make you less efficient. And then that also puts you in this downward spiral where when you're not able to actually move forward, you feel like you're not getting anything done and you feel bad about yourself. And then it kind of goes downward.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. It's I think it's fascinating. And we talked for a minute before the show about the idea of freedom and how sometimes, tying yourself to a schedule and having to make all these decisions and it sounds almost like that is a way to structure your life so that you're more constrained. But the reality is that these habits are what actually ultimately give you the freedom that you're looking for.
Yes, you're creating the space to have the freedom, and you're not letting the demands of other people dictate what your life looks like. And you're not letting your impulses dictate what your life looks like. You're letting your considered desires dictate what your lives look like.
Right. Which means taking the time to know what your considered desires are and all of these things. And I know you talk, I was listening to one of your YouTube videos and you were talking about just making sure that you do create that time to think about this stuff, which is something that I really endorse as well. But how do you, help people do that?
So there's a couple different ways. So at the very highest level, I have something called a life portfolio. And it's if you search life portfolio or go to strategiclifetools.com, it's one of the tools. It's a way to visualize what are all the different commitments that we're doing in our lives and what are the different pillars under which we do those commitments. So for me, there's a foundation level, which are things like where I have to sleep, I have to eat, I have to do my finances, right? But then there's different pillars. Like I have a personal pillar, I have a community pillar, professional, and a business pillar. And in each of those, I'm looking at what are the things I do. And so I'll map out everything. And what I find when I walk people through this exercise, or when they go through these exercises, they discover exactly how much they have on their plate, because they never actually put it on paper. They never actually visualized how much they have on their plate. And then the next step is to say, okay, which of those things do you want to take off your plate? What do you want to reduce or eliminate? What do you want to increase? Because that's what's giving you joy. That's what's giving you some sort of value to your life. And so that's the highest level. And then after that, I have this simple 3-word things that I tell people to do, which is stop doing, plan. Because what people tend to do is they dive in and they just start executing. And they don't take the time to take a step back and plan and course correct. So even if, say at the start of the year, you figure out what you want to do for the rest of the year, and then you figure, I'm going to jump in and I'm going to just execute on that. Well, think about a boat. If you're just a little tiny bit off, 1 little degree off, 1 mile out, it's not a problem. But if you're 50 miles out, you're way off course. Mm-hmm. So having this regular practice of stopping what you're doing and planning and course correcting, I think it's critical to make sure that you actually, go in the direction you really want to go.
That's great. Yeah, so true. And what about, so you're talking about executing, what about people more like me who have a lot of ideas and get a little tripped up with the completion part of it, and all of a sudden you're at the end of a project and everything else is coming up, or you're moving on to new things, and you really need to stop and do one thing and finish it?
Yeah, and so that's where it's recognizing that if you don't stop, you won't get anything done, right? You need to kind of cue stuff. So there's in the Kanban. If you're using a Kanban board, they have this concept of works in progress, and they have a limit on how many works in progress you can have. So like often the limit is 3. I can't have more than 3 different things going on at once. And so once I have 3, I have to finish one before I can add another thing into that bin. So forcing yourself into these constraints can help increase your flow and help produce more work product. Because otherwise you'll have like 9, 10 projects that are almost complete or half started. And then it gets very difficult to actually get anything done. And once you finish a project, what that actually does is it gives you this dopamine boost in your brain. It gives you this motivation. I just did that. Mm-hmm. And now it gives you more motivation to do the next thing. So you wind up actually doing more energy if you can kind of knock things out. Focusing on that, I think. Yeah. A real quick aside is, if anyone's a fan of Derek Sivers, he just did a great post on his blog or his website called "How Many Pets Do You Have?" And it was a great analogy of the projects that we take on, and we have these emotional attachment to these projects, but we're not serving the projects by keeping so many of them around. We really need to focus on fewer and do those better and really bring them to adulthood and then let them go and then raise the next one. We shouldn't try to have 10, 12 pets that we're all trying to raise at once.
I love that. That's great. Yeah, it's such an interesting topic. Did you ever find yourself in a place where you were very, very busy, but busy was not really equating to feeling productive?
Yeah.
Okay.
As in everyone.
I feel like that's just such a state that so many people are in. And I've come to really not like the word busy, because I've heard myself so many times say, "Oh, I'm just so busy. I can't, whatever." And so that word actually is really a negative to me at this point. And that's, I think, an indication of not stopping and looking at what you're doing and really being very mindful and conscious about it. But it is a state that sometimes is hard to get out of.
Yeah, I think it can be difficult because I think the reason it's difficult is it requires a mind shift. It requires changing how we approach stuff.
Right.
And changing our brains is much harder than just like doing what you said to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like we all know we should spend less time on email, but actually doing it is the thing. And changing that shift to like how I approach email, like, or how do I approach all the demands that are coming at me?
Right.
We can talk about the strategies, but it's actually implementing them and trying them out that is the problem. And I think the other problem there is people want perfection too soon. Right? They want to immediately have it all under control. And if some strategy doesn't immediately let them have everything under control, it wasn't a good strategy. Like they shouldn't have done that, right? And I think what you need to do is have patience. You will mess it up the first time. You'll mess it up the second time. But if you keep applying those principles, you will slowly shift your mindset to where suddenly you gain this freedom that you never thought you could have.
Mm. Yeah, super interesting. And I know your work is based on neuroscience principles. So any particular principles that you can point to that are, helpful for people to be aware of?
Probably the biggest is the concept of implementation intentions. So this is a concept in the psychological research. It basically is this idea of creating an if-then statement. And the idea is, if you just say, oh, I want to achieve this goal, I want to work out more, whatever. If you commit to it, you can get a little bit of a boost. Sometimes it can give you a little bit of ability to achieve that. But if instead what you say is, I'm going to work out Tuesdays at 7 in the morning. Now what I've done is saying, like, if it is 7 o'clock in the morning and it's Tuesday, then I am working out. Right? This if-then, that's a time-based implementation intention. And that makes you, I think the research is like twice as likely to achieve your goals when you create these if-then statements. And it doesn't have to be time-based. It can be in other situations. Like if I am out at say I'm wanting to go on a diet, if I'm out at a restaurant and the waiter asks me what I want to order, I order a salad first before ordering anything else. So they have to bring me a salad. I have to eat the salad, and then I can order the next thing, right?
Very
so
cool. Yeah.
Creating these if-then rules can help us achieve our goals much easier. And that's probably the biggest thing with the psychological research.
Oh, I love that. I love the idea of just sort of writing out a bunch of if-thens for myself. So that, yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah. There was something else that I was listening to that you said that I found fascinating, and that was the difference between energy and mood. And I'd love for you to share that. I thought that was really a unique kind of idea.
Yeah. So often the example I give to show the difference is often people say, oh, I'm not in the mood, or I don't have the energy to do this, when what they really mean is they're not in the mood. And how you can tell when you don't have the energy, when it's an energy versus a mood issue, is if you're like, oh, I don't have the energy to work on this project. And then you go and you dive into Facebook in full energy. That means you weren't in the mood, not that you didn't have the energy. Because obviously you had the energy. Not having the energy means you need to go take a nap, right? You can't do anything.
Yeah.
And, not being in the mood means you have the energy. You just don't want to work on that. Mm-hmm. And so there are different strategies for shifting your energy versus shifting your mood. Like I just gave the example, if you want to shift your energy because you have low energy, you might need to take a nap. You might need to go eat. Maybe you can drink a cup of coffee. Those are things to shift your energy. To shift your mood is a lot more fickle, right? Energy kind of follows this kind of slow wave throughout the day. Whereas mood, if you distract yourself for a couple of minutes, suddenly your mood can change. If you're sad, you watch a funny video and suddenly you're in a good mood, right? Mood can be changed very quickly. And so I teach this concept called jump starts, which are a way to shift between different things to shift your mood. So if you're not in the mood to write, then one useful way to get in the mood to write is to start editing. Because, take something that you did in the past and edit. Well, that will actually shift your brain into working with words and then get you in the mood to write. right? Another strategy is something called prime the pump, where I work on something for I had to say, I need to work on it for 5 minutes. I set a timer and then I take a break. I force myself to take a break. What I've done is I prime the pump and I've actually create this, this mood that I want to return. So I come back at it in a much more intense mood to work on the project. So thinking about mood and energy as different concepts, I think is very valuable.
Yeah, that's great. I love the jumpstart idea. I never thought about that before. And I do have a lot of resistance to writing, even though I actually like writing, but that's sitting down and starting. So I thought that was brilliant to go and just edit something first. That was very helpful. Yeah. It was super interesting. And all of these little tricks and hacks and what have you, I mean, is that just the way it is? Is that what we have to do? Play games with ourselves and make it fun and trick ourselves a little bit?
I mean, yes. I mean, we are like impulsive creatures, right? Like our brains, we have a lizard brain. And if like we need to override that lizard brain and we need to train ourselves to override it, right? And some of it is like, yes, you can just train yourself to dampen those impulses, right? Like if you meditate, one of the points of meditation is the ability to kind of control some of those impulses more, right? Yeah. But at the same time, it is also useful to use these hacks. There's a classic thing around willpower is it is way less effective to try to use willpower to beat a problem than it is to use one of these hacks to beat the problem. So there was a famous marshmallow experiment that most people know about where these kids were given a marshmallow and told, if you don't eat that marshmallow, you'll get 2 marshmallows in 5 minutes. And then the person running the study leaves the room, right? And what people tend to think is like, oh, the people who didn't eat the marshmallow were the ones who had great willpower. Well, no, they weren't staring at the marshmallow going, I will not eat that marshmallow. I will not eat that. That doesn't work, right? Like, you're just building up the pressure to eat the marshmallow. I mean, maybe if you have super strong willpower, you can do that. A lot of the kids in that study, how they did it is they distracted themselves. They looked at the clock. They looked at something else. They checked their nails, right? They did other strategies so they didn't have to use the willpower. So they didn't have to try to override their lizard brain. They distracted the lizard brain. So yeah, I think that is the way it is,
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, I grew up in the age of you need to be disciplined and you need to have willpower, and that's all there was. Like those were your tools, and nobody was very good at them except a few of the Navy people you probably knew back in the day. But so let's talk for a minute too about time blocking, because well, I have a love-hate relationship with time blocking, but I think it's super important. I don't usually like what I see when I do it, but how do you do that? How do you have people do that?
So I think time blocking is critical because it helps you make the investment decisions on how you're going to allocate your time, right? So if we think of our time like a portfolio, just like our financial portfolio, we're allocating it across different, categories, right? So in our financial portfolio, we might say, oh, we're going to allocate a certain amount to stocks, a certain amount to bonds. Within stocks, we might say a certain amount international, certain amount domestic. Well, in time, we're doing the same thing. It's like, how much time are we going to dedicate to marketing? How much time are we dedicating to servicing clients? How much time to admin work? How much time to our personal life? These are decisions we need to be making. And so time blocking allows us to create the structure within which that works, right? So when I say, okay, from 2 to 4, I'm going to be working on marketing, that gives me a framework to work on marketing in that time. It also gives me an allocation. So I think that's critical. I try to teach when people do time blocking for important projects and tasks, you can time block those specific things. Like doing my taxes, I might need to time block for taxes, right? But a lot of times it's useful to think in terms of categories or groups of things. So I want to time block for marketing. I want to time block for client work, whatever. Keep separate task lists for those. Don't even look at those task lists when you're doing the time blocking. Just block out your time at the high level. make those strategic decisions. And then it's 2:00, it's time to work on marketing. Okay, I go to my marketing task list and I start working down from the highest priority to the lowest priority. And I just kind of keep working. And I think that really helps. The other thing is going to be the distinction between time blocking and time boxing. Time blocking is where I set aside time to move a project forward, but I'm not necessarily saying that's the only time I have for it.
Okay.
Whereas time boxing is where I'm really trying to say, okay, I only have this amount of time to work on something. So a classic thing is I need to do research. Say I'm going to research a new TV I'm going to buy. We all know we can spend endless hours on the internet researching things. So what I might say is, okay, I'm going to time box. I'm going to say I'm only going to spend an hour doing this research, and then I'm going to make the decision, right? Within that hour, I might even then block it out and say, okay, I'm going to have the first 20 minutes, I'm going to see what are all the different TVs. The second 20 minutes, I'm going to dive in and look at what are my top 3 options? How do they compare? I can even do time blocking within my time box. Right. But setting that limit really kind of help us catch ourselves from going down rabbit holes, right? Because if I say I'm going to spend an hour on it and it's an hour and 15 minutes later, well, now I need to be accountable to myself. I need to stop doing that because I said I was only going to spend an hour on it.
Right.
So yeah, those are the different concepts. Is number one is when you time block, try to time block at a higher level if possible. So time block on your categories and your groups, and then use time boxing to prevent yourself from going over on the amount of time you want to spend on something.
I love that. It's really interesting because I use, I hire a company called worksitter.com, and I didn't realize this, but what they do is they time box for me. And so just a couple hours a week, I have somebody sit on Zoom with me. I have an hour. They ask me what I'm going to do in that hour, and we break it up in, a certain number of minutes for each task, and they hold me to it. And when you know that, that hour is going to end, and you've committed to certain things, you really get stuff done in that hour. It's super interesting, and that's your time boxing, which I didn't realize that's what I was doing, but.
Yeah, my old coach, Steve Robbins, he runs this things called Get It Done groups. We're very similar, like once, I think it's once a month or once a week, where everyone gets together, and for one day, every hour they have to check in. It's a 5-minute call. Yeah. They say, what did I do the previous hour? What am I going to do the next hour? Yeah. And you've got to commit. And it's interesting how hyper productive people get with that. The technique that I teach, that if you want to do it yourself, that is kind of related, is this idea called pacing. And it's it relates to time boxing or time blocking. But what you do is say, I'm going to work on something for 2 hours. Well, you don't want to set an alarm for 2 hours, right? Because at the end of 2 hours, it's too late. You're already done, right? Instead, what I do is I set a timer on my phone for a half an hour, and then it goes off. And then I just repeat it another half an hour. And what it does is it brings awareness into time passing, so you can pay attention and make decisions during that 2 hour time block on how to tackle your work. Because maybe you now know an hour has passed. Okay, now I need to really kind of double down, buckle down, and kind of do something. And you can do this, you can do 5-minute pacing blocks if you want, if you're doing a 15-minute block, whatever you want to do. The one recommendation I do tell people is, when you're using this technique, don't use a really jarring alarm sound. Use something that's very gentle, because what you're trying to do is just bring awareness to time passing. Yeah. You're not trying to startle your system. So I personally have mine set to ocean waves on my iPhone, so that at the end of those, that half an hour, end of 15 minutes, I just hear these gentle ocean waves occurring. And then now I know, okay, the time is up, time to reset and think about the next thing.
Yeah. Oh, I love all of this. There's so much. You could just talk about these. I can totally see why you wanted to throw yourself into this topic, because it is fascinating. If you could take what you know now and go back in time to when you had some of your earlier businesses, what impact do you think that would have had?
I think I would have focused more on really living my life, not just trying to grow my business. particularly in my 30s, I spent a lot of my time very focused on trying to put as much energy as I could into growing the business. And sometimes that's necessary. But I think we too often fall into that as the default of, let me just put in more effort, let me put in more work, because we don't think about, or maybe it's uncomfortable to take the step back and say, let me just actually see, what do I actually want? What's the plan to get there? There is a useful exercise, which is like this idea where you think about, how do I get 10 times the results I want? How do I make 10 times the amount of money? Or how do I do something in 10 times less time? So, instead of doing something in 10 months, how do I do it in a month, right? And the goal of that exercise is not to solve the problem, not that you are going to be able to know how you 10 times something, but is to shift your mindset into thinking about the problem in new ways, so that you come out of it with a solution that might be 2, 3, 5 times better. And every once in a while it is 10 times, but the goal isn't like, if you don't reach 10 times, it's not that it's a failure. It's a shifting that mindset. And I think too often we don't take that time to step back and do these exercises to shift our mindset, to really do the planning, to make sure that we're working smartly, not just working hard.
Right. Yeah, that's such a great tip. And that's what people do. They work hard in some ways because that's what we're conditioned to do, but also sometimes it's the easy way to go. I mean, sometimes it's hard to pull back and stop and rethink things. And anyway, this is so good. I could talk about this all day. I would love to ask you how people can get in touch with you. What have you got in this regard to offer to people who, I know everybody needs this work that you're doing?
So with the Day Optimizer, they can go to dayoptimizer.com, and we offer a 7-day free trial on there. And then also the newsletter, I'll send out different tips and stuff like that, education materials around there. Mindful Productivity is a YouTube channel. If you search for Mindful Productivity on YouTube, you'll find the YouTube channel. It has like this little circle with a violet leaf in it as the icon. So you'll know that's it. And I teach different, again, concepts that people can use throughout their lives on how to be more conscious and productive, like more aware of what they're doing with their productivity. And people can also find me on Twitter at FastFedora, or Day Optimizer on Twitter at Day Optimizer app.
Thank you. That's great. And I do hope people will follow you and learn from this, because this is a way to optimize your life. And before you go, I would love for you to talk just a minute about, or a couple minutes about, lifestyle. And you have a unique lifestyle. You've made that work. I'm assuming some of what you've done, but also what you're teaching now has contributed to you being able to live the lifestyle that you are. Do you want to comment on that a little bit?
Yeah, certainly. So just so the audience knows, what I do is I live say 3 to 5 months a year in Berlin, Germany. And then the rest of the year I live in Asheville, North Carolina, where I own a house. And it started about 4 years ago. After I sold my last company and I worked out the contract, I went on a trip around Europe with my partner, and I wanted to start Strategic Life Tools. I really wanted to help people with their lifestyle design, and decided that I was going to settle in one of the cities in Europe for 3 months to kind of just live in Europe for a little bit. I had never done that, and wound up settling in Berlin, and discovered that Berlin has this amazing swing dance scene. I'm a swing dancer, and I could go out every single night of the week dancing if I wanted to. I have German heritage. My father's German. So it gave me an opportunity to learn German and go much deeper in German. Berlin is not really the ideal city to learn German because everyone speaks English, but it was helpful.
Yeah.
And so it was more just saying, okay, this is what I want to do. Now let's work backwards to how do we achieve that, right? And that was going and saying, okay, can we rent out? We had rented out our house for when we went on this journey. So it's okay, we can rent out the house. We can rent out part of the house, and so that's what we started to do is like, I travel part of the year, she travels part of the year, and part of the year we live together, and we just rent out different parts of the house, or if we're both traveling, we rent out the whole house. And we've kind of just looked backwards from that and saying, how can I make that work? And then looking at the constraints and saying, okay, how can I find a cheap place? I don't want to rent, an apartment here like full time because I'm not here full time. So finding these roommate situations where they're traveling for 3 months, so I get to come and live in the room for 3 months. And over time, that has now evolved to where I've got a semi-permanent roommate situation here with a great roommate that we get along well with. So it's just been having the idea, really forming what I wanted first, and then asking the question, what are the paths toward that? And then not being constrained by like some sort of like box. It has to be X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And it really developed from there.
I love it. So you have created a very unique and fun and also productive lifestyle. That's a huge achievement. So I really commend you for that. And I think it's important for people to hear your story and see how you've done that and that you are doing that, because sometimes it doesn't feel like those things are possible in life as much as you'd like them. But I think that one of the important things that you did is make a decision about what you want, which I think is also something that's tough for people to do. And sometimes people don't take the time to figure that one out either. So. Yeah.
And so one last exercise I'll leave you with that I think is a useful one around that is this idea of, and this is also, if people go, I made Strategic Life Tools free when I pivoted to Day Optimizer, so they can go to Strategic Life Tools and see this. The exercise is called In 5 Years. Mm-hmm. But what you do is you write down in 5 years, 2 things. What does your life look like on a day-to-day basis in 5 years? And what have you done in the past 5 years since that point, right? Mm-hmm. So you're putting yourself 5 years in the future and then looking back and saying, what did I achieve? What happened in the past 5 years? And then what does my life look like? And you want to do it at a like granular level. You don't want to just say like, oh, I own a house. You want to say, okay, well, what does the house look like? What's the furniture inside of it? And I ask people to say, when I say, what are you doing? What do you do every single day? What do you do every single week? What do you do every single month? Like really get into what does your life look like? What do your relationships look like? What does your health look like? What do your finances look like? Mm-hmm. What does your work look like? And just kind of like just write your ideal life, right? But write it to where it's kind of comprehensive and it's down there. And then you can then start looking at, okay, how are the ways I can kind of move from where I am today to there? And then how can I achieve the things along that path that I want to achieve in those 5 years?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. I love that. And specificity gives you a lot of clarity and helps to guide you. So that's really great. Thank you so much. You've been a great guest. I've loved getting to know, your story and what you do and what you have to offer. And so that was strategiclifetools.com.
Correct.
And dayoptimizer.com.
Yep.
Okay. And then Mindful Productivity on YouTube. And I'll put the rest of the links that you have in the show notes. And terrific. I'm inspired and I'm ready to get super productive and do all kinds of new things. And thank you so much and enjoy your time in Berlin. That's also very inspiring to hear how you're doing that. So.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Yeah, okay. Take care. Have a good night.
Okay.
And thank you again.
Thanks so much.
Okay, listeners, thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed that. I think Trevor has a fascinating story, and there's lots to take in and lots to think about and lots more on his YouTube channel and everything else. So please check him out and subscribe to the Limit Free Life Show. Follow us on Apple Podcasts and all the other podcast platforms that exist out there that we're on, and the Limit Free Life YouTube channel as well. You'll see the show on video there. And contact me. I'd love to hear from you and find out what some of your questions are and some of the things that you need to run your business better, or to change your career, or to figure out how to create the financial situation that you really want in your life. And you can reach me at limitfreelife.com, and also Michelle, 2 L's, at limitfreelife.com. You can email me. Thank you so much for being here. We're here every week. We air live at ubngo.com on Monday nights at 7. And then after that, we're on all those places that I just mentioned. So thank you again, and get out there, have a productive week. I know it's the end of the show. We always do a tough love money tip, and I'm trying to see, to try to line it up with today's show. I'm always recommending money dates, weekly money dates, and I think because we talked a lot about time blocking, I'm going to ask you to put that weekly money date in your calendar and make sure you are paying attention and getting connected and close to your money, so the two of you can work together to create the lifestyle that you want. And I've got a lot more information on what you can do on those weekly money dates. So just, I have a earlier podcast on that, and lots of blogs and information on that. So connect with me if you need to. I have a course on that as well. So great having you listening to the show, and thanks for being here. We'll see you next week.